morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this Talent Talks webinar around parenting and parenting in the workplace. My name is Lita Curry, and I will be your host for today if I don't fall over my words. Thank you very much for joining us for this month's Talent Talk webinar. A little bit of a spiel about Talent Talks as we're waiting for people to join the webinar. Talent Talks is a powerful online reference library to help business owners and professionals effectively manage their talent from recruitment through to retirement. You can find us on talenttalks.net, or you can follow us on LinkedIn under Talent Talks Africa, so please check it out. Now, as we go through this webinar, a couple of things that I'd like for you to be aware of. We'd like to involve you in polls to get some feedback from you as our audience, so please look out for that. You'll also see that there's a question and answer tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'd like for you to ask some questions. We've got a tremendous panel for you, and I'm going to introduce them within a minute. But if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please put them in the Q&A, and there will be about 5 to 10 minutes time for us right at the end of the webinar to answer those questions. We'd also like for you to use the chat. If you have any ideas, if you've got comments, please share them in the chat. I always find that really interesting when I'm in a webinar to see what other people are doing and what they're thinking. So please use the chat. If you look at your setup, the gallery view is the best setup. So if you look at the top of your screen, you should have a view option there. So click on gallery view so that you have the best setup for that. Right at the end of the webinar, we'll also ask you for feedback. So look out for a survey. It's just one question just to get your feedback in terms of how you've experienced this. We'll also publish the highlights from this webinar on talenttalks.net and on LinkedIn next week. So you're welcome to have a look at that and share it with your network. Important point to know is that we are recording this webinar. We'll be looking at the chat. We'll be looking at the Q&A as well. So if you're part of this webinar, you are agreeing to be recorded as that. So please look out for that. Right, so that's all the logistic stuff out of the way. We'll try and keep it interesting throughout the hour. And we'd like to start off with a poll. So Trevor, if you can launch the first poll for us. The question that I'd like for you to think about is, what is the biggest challenge for you as a working parent? And we've got a couple of options there. You can see them on the screen: helping with schoolwork and homework during lockdown or during quarantine, or giving attention to the kids while you're still working at the same time, struggling to set boundaries at home. I've had someone ask me for a 6 o'clock in the morning meeting the other day, which was a bit of a surprise. We're working late, we're working early. Is that what you're struggling with? Getting your partner to share the burden a little bit more, or if you're not a working parent, you can show us that as well. It is a multiple choice, so please give us your input. I'm going to give it a minute or so that people can give us the feedback there. We'd like to hear from you. So as we're waiting for you to fill in the poll, let me give you a little bit of context around what we're going to be talking about today. Now, it was Mother's Day in June, and Mother's Day in May, and Father's Day is coming up in June. And we know that as parents, the role that we've played during the last year and a half has really changed. I know that it has for me. The pandemic has brought with us quarantines, lockdowns, homeschooling, and probably, a lot more stress on working parents and a lot more stress on organizations. Now, I have 2 school-going children, and I know that I've had to download and figure out where to find worksheets. I've had to help with homework. And what I can remember of grade 9 maths is really scary. So it's been a difficult time. I've also had them barging in while I'm doing webinars or Zoom sessions, asking for, if they can have biscuits or they can watch TV or whatever. So I'm sure that you've experienced a lot of those things as well. Now, at the same time, I have to do work. I have to get the outputs that I need to achieve. So today we're going to be having a conversation around those challenges, and we're going to be talking about it from 3 different viewpoints. Now, before I get into the viewpoints, Trevor, can we ask that we see the results of the poll, please? Let's have that on the screen so that we can see what are the biggest challenges that people are facing with. Very interesting. So 53% of you saying giving attention to the kids while still achieving the work outputs. They probably need a lot more of our time, a lot more of our attention. I've had to particularly focus on when my kids come in, and I'm not doing a session, but I'm just working, that I actually stop what I'm doing, turn to them and give the attention. It's sometimes very difficult. Thank you for your feedback. You can close the poll, or you can close the results on your screen. So let's talk about the 3 different viewpoints that we'd like to bring up today. First of all, a viewpoint around what parents can do to meet the new requirements, how they can support their children better, how they can stay sane in this new normal, and how they can ensure that the changing relationship with teachers are productive. So that's the first viewpoint. The second viewpoint is the viewpoint of expectant parents, people that are getting ready to have children, people that are currently in maternity or paternity leave, how they can plan for going into the paternity and maternity leave, how they can come back into a changing workplace, and how they can rejoin their organizations seamlessly. So that's the second viewpoint. And the third and final viewpoint is from an organizational point of view. How can organizations support working parents a little bit better? How can they help employees cope? How can they help them set boundaries and stay resilient? It's interesting that this is actually becoming a competitive advantage for a lot of companies. So the panel that we have for you today, I'm going to quickly go through them and then we're going to get into our first panel member. We have Caitlin Watson from Advitech, we've got Melanie Green from Great Expectations, and we've got Jackie Cabb from Alexander Forbes. So our first panelist is Caitlin Watson. So Caitlin is a learning and development expert. She's currently working at Advitech. She says she's passionate about contributing to adult learning, and she's held several jobs in fast-moving consumer goods companies, in telecoms, and currently in the private education industry. She is a mother of a 4-year-old, and what makes her perspective even more interesting is that she used to be a teacher. So Caitlin, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Rita. I'm really excited to be here. And I'm really hoping I can contribute something meaningful and that people can take something away that they can actually use.
Awesome. Thank you for your time. So let's jump into it. As
Sure.
a parent, what has been your biggest challenge over the last 18 months as a working parent?
So 3 things stand out for me. The first is managing the COVID narrative for my family. So really focusing and understanding what people are saying around COVID, learning what my daughter is exposed to, both at school, in her, at her gymnastics class, at her various places that she does activities at. I'm mindful about what people are saying. And so what I'm trying to do is just manage that anxiety for my family, and so that we're not constantly overloaded with kind of this frightening story that is being told.
Yeah.
The second is, moving between the office and moving back home, work from home, work from office, depending on lockdown, depending on the level of lockdown, and depending on the different business requirements, I find that we move between the two. So there doesn't seem to be consistency around that. And I find that has created some anxiety for my daughter, because normally she, in 1 week, she can pop in and see me for that biscuit, or Mom, what can I watch Frozen on TV? And other days, then I'm home late and she doesn't have that access to me. So I think just communicating that with her and helping her manage that has been a little bit stressful. And then I'm sure, as most parents have experienced, is actually finding a physical space, a separate space at home where you can have your calls, where it literally isn't, you don't have your Jack Russells barking, asking for a treat, and you don't have Let It Go blasting in the background while you're trying to make a budget decision on a call. So I think those are my 3 main challenges.
Yeah.
Just managing the narrative, managing the changing schedule in line with COVID regulations, and then just finding that separate space.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to pick up on that COVID narrative, and I want to ask our participants to share in the chat something that they found work to have a conversation with your children, and an age-appropriate conversation. Interesting, a 4-year-old has a particular worldview that you have to take into account when you communicate with them. I have a 14-year-old who contracted the virus about a month ago, and his response was complete panic and complete anxiety, because he's seen this pandemic growing in the last 18 months. And we've really had to have a deep conversation around how do we manage through lockdown. How do we manage him during quarantine? How do we make sure that he feels as if he's protected and he's being looked after? Mm-hmm. So to the participants, please have a chat and share with us a couple of those ideas in terms of how you've had those conversations with your kids. Maybe something around how you've set up at home. Some of us, as Caitlin says, has an opportunity to have a home office. I've had people who've had to sit on their beds for 2 weeks, dialing in. So if you found anything that works there, please share that with us as well. So what if you personally seen in terms of the way that you handle the crisis? How have you shown up as a parent? Caitlin?
So what I've tried to do is use, especially for my daughter, is use some really practical tools to help her articulate her emotions around COVID and around her anxiety around that. And so the tools I've been using are books. There's this lovely store out in my area that the whole concept of the store focuses on emotional literacy. So empowering children to actually be able to talk about their emotions and therefore manage them. And so they've got a great series called Once Upon a Rhyme, and there's one particular book I use. It's about a giraffe who experiences anxiety about germs and dirt and that sort of thing. And so the moral of the story, I suppose, is that if you prepare, wear your mask, make sure you've got your sanitizer with you, you can go a long way to alleviating your anxiety. And so that's what I've been trying to help my daughter with, and then really focus on those books that help her articulate those emotions. I really have seen that has worked with her. It's actually been amazing to see. Yeah.
So once Upon a Rhyme. You say Once Upon a Rhyme.
Once Upon a Rhyme, yes. And it's a whole series. It's lovely.
And the nice thing is, it seems like it's age-appropriate stories that you can use for toddlers to help them to make sense of that. And as you say, that emotional literacy, get them to speak about what it is that they're feeling. And I would imagine that for older children, that would be equally as important, making sure that they understand how to use their words, how to use the emotions to really speak through that. Anything else that you've seen as a working parent, as an employee, managing that work-life balance? What else have you found that works?
So I think it helps that I'm an integrator. So you get your segmenters and integrators. So I'm the type of person that, I'm happy to go to the dentist in the morning, but then you'll see me working late at night to make up for those hours. I'm happy to take calls after hours. And so there's my work life is very fluid. So what I have seen that's been very important is to make sure that I set boundaries at home, so that I set boundaries with my customers and make sure that I actually put my laptop away and I dedicate the time to my daughter and my husband. And very often, I've spoken to my daughter's teacher, and she says you don't have to spend hours and hours of dedicated time. Really, a short amount of time that's fully focused on your child is enough for them to feel connected with. So I normally do that over bath time with my daughter, and we read and do crossword puzzles, and we just chat through things, which is really wonderful. And then dedicating time to my husband in our regular date nights. So thanks, Mom. She's normally babysitting for us. So we can actually then have a conversation that doesn't involve logistics around managing a 4-year-old. Mm-hmm. I've got a few other really practical ones. I actually have a physical magnetic calendar on my fridge. And I know it sounds really basic, but this has helped my husband and I communicate and ensure that we don't drop any balls, that we actually know what's going on in our schedules. Otherwise, we'll definitely drop a ball somewhere. What I can say, just from a manager's perspective, is it's really important to understand whether your employee prefers that to be an integrator or a segmentor, and really respect those boundaries, because for a segmentor, someone who likes to separate work and their work and home life, if they are constantly being bombarded with queries outside of that structured set time, they will be very stressed and unhappy. So having a little bit of an understanding of that, I think, will really lessen the stress and anxiety around working from home.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is have that conversation in your team, find out what people's expectations are, what their limitations are, what their timing is like, and try and work throughout the day within those limitations. It's interesting you say that. I'm reading a book called Radical Candor, and one of the stories in there was the lady who just had twins. So she didn't want to come in early in the morning, but she would be happy to work later at night. So she started setting up meetings later at night, until the people in her team said, we also have children. So if you set up a meeting at 6 o'clock at night, that's our dinner time. We can't have meetings. So having that conversation and open agreements in terms of how are we going to manage this in the team seems to be really important. So in the chat, guys, for the participants, before I ask Caitlin the next question, Please share with us some of the tips and the tricks that you've used in your own team. Maybe some of the conversations that you've had with your team members or with your line managers around how to manage through this. What have you found really works? And it's great to see some of those chats coming through. So thank you for that. So Caitlin, the other question that I wanted to ask you was around the support that you've had from your manager. I know your manager. We've worked together, so we're not going to mention him.
So I can't say anything I'm not supposed to.
You can't say anything. But what have you found that was really valuable from a line manager support point of view that you want to share with our group?
So the fact that she treats me as a professional and trusts that I will get my work done. So whether or not I'm at the office makes little difference to the quality of my outputs. She knows that I will still deliver my work. But it's, you know, we've had a great working relationship. So we've been able to build that trust, and we're at that point where, you know, she's comfortable to let me do what I need to do. I never feel that I have to choose between work or family, because I'm able to integrate the two, and she knows that I will deliver my stuff. So it's given me a huge sense of freedom. I'm operating from a place of power versus a place of fear, and a fear of being micromanaged. So I don't experience that at all, and it's really been great. I'd really strongly recommend the same approach for line managers. You know, I think if the intention is, when you connect with your employees and you allow them to work from home, you treat them as professionals, and you tell them that you trust them, and that you explain how the check-ins will work. And the check-ins really aren't an opportunity to try and weed out poor performance. The intention is to create some engagement, to connect and build trust with your employees. So I think how the manager approaches the working from home situation, and the trust and the narrative that they share with their employee around what they believe they're capable of, etc., I think makes a big difference. So I've found it's really, really worked well for me. She also communicates regularly around what's happening in the business. So where there are regulatory changes around COVID or something that's changed, I get communication around that, and the entire team is informed. So that manages my anxiety around that. And the other thing, and I suppose you know my manager, so you know she's very open, and we've got a great relationship. Sharing stories on motherhood and some of the challenges that we're experiencing has really helped us to connect, and helped me to realize that I'm not the only mother feeling that I'm, you know, treading water and just kind of holding on sometimes. I'm mindful though that, you know, we do need to be vulnerable. I think there's a lot of research into the importance of that and how that builds joy and trust. But as Brene Brown says, vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability. So we need to just share those stories, but always keep that within an appropriate boundary with our manager.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to move into the educational space now, because with your background, having been a teacher in high school and now working for Advitech, the question that I'm asking is, what should and can educational institutions do to support parents during this pandemic? What have you guys done at Advitech?
Sure. So Advitech has done some really wonderful initiatives. We've partnered with SADAG as part of our group employee wellness program. And so SADAG, what we love about them is that they provide support to an employee and their entire family. And so whether one of the children are struggling with feelings of isolation at home or exam stress, or a parent may have, the father may have lost his job through retrenchment as a result of COVID, and he's feeling stressed about that, they can all reach out to SADAG, to professionals to assist them with that process, talk through things, and then give the appropriate guidance. So I think that's wonderful. And then what was fantastic is one of our brand's junior colleges, actually during that period where ECD schools were not back yet, but other schools were, so it was quite a stressful time for parents. They, on the teacher's campus, so on the teacher's campus where their particular employee was teaching, they would have supervised classes for the teacher's children, whether or not they were at an Advitech school. And so the teacher could have a safe space for her children to come at the same campus, because she may not have had the support, or he may not have had the support at home. They could then stay on that campus during the day, and they'd have supervised classes. They might have been doing homework that was given to them by another school. But it really went a long way to helping the children feel safe, and help giving the parents peace of mind. I think that was fantastic. And the final thing is our central academic team focused on pastoral care. So they put together a program centered around pastoral care for students, especially those doing online learning and off-site. And it really looks at the child holistically and building nurturing relationships and trust and all of that. And so our teachers used that as a framework for which to design their online learning program. So I think those were some really great things that Advotech undertook.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. Final question. I remember when my eldest went to grade 1, I got a note from the teacher saying, I promise not to believe everything your child tells me that happens at home if you promise not to believe everything that they tell you happens at school. And it's something that I've tried to link into in terms of my relationship with the teachers. As parents, how can we support teachers better? How can we make sure that relationship really works? As a final question for you.
Sure. Communication. Communication is key, and knowing how to communicate and having a shared understanding and meaning and purpose to the conversation is important. So our parents at Advotech pay a lot of money for their children to receive personalized attention. And so it's important that our teachers provide that attention, provide that communication so that the child's needs are met. Mm-hmm. But what is important is that we create boundaries. So again, boundaries. So if the teacher is going to be available via WhatsApp or a phone call, they need to make sure that they're available and they communicate with it, that they're available at between a certain period of time, and they commit to responding within that period of time. The parent then also understands that yes, they want their child to receive that attention, but within an appropriate system and within those boundaries. And so what that will do is help alleviate anxiety, but also proactively address any concerns that the parents have, knowing that that teacher is available for them. So what we're focusing on at Advotech is building 2 key capabilities over the next 2 years, and that is the ability to have a courageous conversation and the focus on understanding the needs of our customers. And so this is for both parents and teachers, but some of the skills around courageous conversations is not making assumptions. So exactly to your point, I won't believe everything. Getting all the facts first, creating a pool of shared meaning, understanding, knowing that you're actually on the same page and creating that space for that, and giving each other the benefit of the doubt, agreeing a way forward. So how are we going to address this, and then actually putting that into action. So so what we want to do for the teachers is create a program where we can give them these guidelines for having the conversations so that they can help the parents know how to engage with them, and they can have difficult conversations with the students as well, all with the purpose of maintaining the relationship, continuing to build trust, and then actually coming to a solution that's implementable.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like the fact that you say give each other the benefit of the doubt, and we're actually on the same team. And the one thing that you don't want is having the child being caught in the middle. So maybe in the chat, if you guys can, for the participants, please share some ideas around how you've had conversations with teachers. What have you found worked, and that you think someone else can get value from? Caitlin, thank you very much for your time. We're going to keep you online because we want to have a Q&A right at the end. So I'll get back to you during that time. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Lita.
That takes us into our second viewpoint, which is around expectant parents. Expectant parents, and parents leaving on maternity and paternity leave and then coming back into the organization. And as a segue into that, I'd like for Trevor to ask us the next poll. And the poll here is going to ask how many of you are either currently expecting or having toddlers, babies to 5-year-olds in the house? Do you have school-going kids? Are you empty nesters? Or maybe a fifth option when none of that apply to you. So, and as we're waiting for the poll to come up, I'd like to introduce our second panelist, Melanie Green. Melanie's linking in from Cape Town, where she sees there is a terrible storm at the moment, and her internet is sometimes a little dipping. So it's great to have you here, Mel. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go through your CV so that people know who you are. She is the CEO of a company called Great Expectations, and it's a company that coaches prospective parents to be ready for that change of having children and helping them return to work after the maternity leave. Now, she says CEO stands for Chief Expectancy Officer, which I absolutely love. I know, Mel, I've known you for a number of years. I know that you're really passionate about mentoring people, women and men, through the changes, the challenges, the joys of integrating your roles as career women, as wives and mothers and fathers, and really making business a better and more accessible place for parents. I don't think we've particularly done all that well yet, so we're on that journey. Now, recently, she's been coaching expectant fathers as well, and it's a kind of sure sign that things are changing in our perspective around the parenting roles. Mel, thank you for being here. It's good to have you.
Thank you. I've been very excited about this panel and so privileged to participate today.
So Mel, first question in terms of the type of work that you're doing and what you're seeing in the organization. The pandemic was particularly tough on expectant parents and on new parents. What have you seen in the work that you've been doing?
Yeah. Well, and I always talk about parenting, having two adult children in their 30s. I've kind of gone through all these decades of parenting, and there's no doubt that it's seasonal, that we go through seasonal challenges. And this has been a particularly tough season on all parents, as we've already heard from Caitlin's experience. And for this community of parents that we work strongly with, which are expectant and new parents, so people who are expecting, whether they are adoptive parents or biological parents to be, and in the first months of parenting, it's anything that they expected of this season of life, anything that they might have hoped for, dreamt of, planned for during the pandemic actually didn't happen. And from my, it's been an emotional roller coaster for everybody, and I have to say for this community of parents, very, very much so. And I must mention just my own personal experience of it as a expectant and now new granny. So I became a gogo on the 29th of May in the heart of lockdown.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And had to deal with my my younger daughter producing our first grandchild in America, already where there's sort of minimal support, and having to go through all this incredible angst of not knowing whether her husband was going to be there for the birth, not knowing, like having absolutely zero contact with anybody who could support on the ground. It was just intense and relentless.
Yeah.
And so, that really kind of brought it home in a very personal way to me, outside of the work that I've been doing with mums and dads during this time.
Well, it kind of links us into that support system. I mean, you were talking about how important that support system is. What have you seen that parents can put in place to help them through something like this?
Yeah, and I think it's highlighted, whether pandemic or not, and I've been using that expression so much recently, pandemic or not. And the reality is that one of the most important ways to build resilience during this time is to know how to ask for help, and who to ask for help from, and having a support system to tap into. And so this is something we talk a lot about in coaching, and I think we've all felt and we've borne the brunt of not having that support system around in the last period. But for new parents specifically, I really feel that one of the most critical factors, that the key piece in the support system, is you as a couple, is you in your relationship. So I'm sorry, single mom, single parents, at the moment, I'm just going to focus on the couple, if you don't mind, because this is the key or the core relationship as far as support goes. And for somebody going off on maternity leave and then having to return to work, if that relationship is really working well, the return to work becomes a much more seamless event. I could hardly call it seamless. It's always tough. It's always dreadful, but you know, we get through it. But it's so much helped along by the fact that you, as a couple, are working together. And so I kind of coined the hashtag for this from our World Cup win, you know, where I think the hashtag at the time was Stronger Together. Yeah. And I absolutely believe that that should be a sort of a hashtag mantra that you have as a couple as you are approaching the arrival of the child. And certainly as you work through this very different period of change that's happening while you're on maternity leave and then in preparation for going back to work. And I'd like to expand that a little bit more, but do you want to just comment on the poll now that the results are through?
Yeah, we've got the poll up. Thank you, Trevor. So a lot of people have school-going kids. It looks like 38%. A lot of people having babies and toddlers in the house. So it looks like most of the people on this call are kind of in that area. And it might be that some people are expecting. We've got 4%, 1 out of 24. So well done and congratulations. But if we talk about that support function, specifically then the relationship between the partners. I know that you do a lot of coaching with people in that situation. What are some of the tips and some of the tricks of the trade that you can share with our group?
Yeah, so I think, you know, one of the first things is realizing that, I mean, our research actually is showing here and globally that, you know, there is a shifting role of the dad at home. So it's going to be interesting to see what some of the comments are, because some people feel quite strongly about this topic. But we know that, you know, outside of the impact of COVID, where men needed to kind of start playing a much stronger role, that research is showing that millennial dads in particular are wanting to take more of a role in the caregiving side as opposed to just the breadwinning, and in the sharing of the caring duty. So it's this advent of the dual career couple, and what does that actually mean and look like? It's not just the two of us sharing breadwinning, but the two of us sharing the caring. And we know that, you know, that dads have been going through some radical changes during COVID, and in changes in their behavior. But I think the thing is that this takes dialogue. And so one of my the things that I kind of rattle on about a lot in conversations that we have about this is that the two of you have to really get into dialogue and be quite deliberate about the dialogue that you have. And by the way, this commentary here is not just related to expectant and new parents. This is in every season of parenting. Dialogue and contracting as a couple is something that should be a regular event. You know, it's like you have to have this bosberaad from time to time and really talk about the things that matter. And I want to highlight a really brilliant book that's become a bit of a textbook for me. And it's called Couples That Work, by a woman called Jennifer Petrolieri. She is an INSEAD professor. She's all over LinkedIn, and it's really been regarded as the guru when it comes to understanding how couples can work effectively and live and love effectively together. And it resonated a lot with me, having a 40+ year marriage. You know, how do we keep it together? And I think that's a question that we ask in every season of parenting. How do we make this work? And so I think it's realizing that when a child arrives, when you start a family, that's the first season, big season, of a change of how you start relating to each other as a couple. When you've both been single, no kids yet. What is it? It's called a dinky. Double income.
Double income, no kids, yeah.
We move from being a dinky, and we've got to find a real word for it when you suddenly that changes and it's kind of like dramatic. My daughter actually said to me, "Mom, why didn't you warn me how much Zach and I are going to argue? We've never argued before." And so that's a major transition, and this is where dialogue is really essential. And it's not just the dialogue around the practicalities. I think this is really an important thing to think about. It's not just about who does what. And I'm sure that was one of the dialogues that happened when COVID happened, where, you know, we might have thrown all our toys out and said, I can't do all of this on my own. You know, you're going to have to step in and do something. And so it's really about talking, not talking just about divvying up the job. You know, these are all the things that we have to do. You're going to do that. I'm going to do that. Because the danger there is that there's resentment. And the danger is that often what happens is we, as the female, design that list and become the manager, having to sort of manage and control and monitor the behavior of our partner, fulfilling his role, which is really not going to work. So for me, it's more about, and not just at this stage of parenting, but those of you who are at different stages and ages of your kids, is to really from time to time sit down and really do what you would do if you were at work running a team. And if you're at work managing a team, from time to time, and usually this is a once or twice a year event, isn't it? Where you sit down and you discuss mutual expectations, where you perhaps go back to what are our values and you reevaluate and kind of consider what are our values, what's important to us, what are our priorities right now, what are the challenges that are facing us, what's working, what's not working, what do I want differently, what do you want differently? And then we go into the how we're going to get there. And unfortunately at home, we want to get into the how we're going to get there before we've actually stepped back a few steps and considered the macro perspective.
Yeah, very
and
true.
So she talks a lot about this in the book, and she gives some really practical ways of doing it. But and I've kind of developed a few worksheets on this, which I'd be happy to share. But I really
awesome.
think that you know, it's all about, Caitlin mentioned communication with teachers. It's all about communication at home and getting really good at it and really thinking about how you talk to each other, and setting some principles around kindness and listening without judgment, and you know, or interruption. And and just really thinking about what do we, because your priorities do change, your priorities expand, and your perspective changes when a child comes onto the scene, whether it's the first, second, or the third.
Yeah, very true. And it changes every time. I mean, because the context and the dynamics of it changes all the time. So I like that idea around having a conversation around expectations, and not just expectations, but what I bring, what I need from you, and how we make this work. And I know I had that with my family right at the beginning of the first lockdown in April. I want to move into the organizational point of view, Mel, because I know you do a lot of work in various organizations, and specifically organizations that are quite high performing and quite high stress. What have you seen that have changed from an organizational point of view in terms of how organizations support expectant parents in the last decade or so? What have you seen that worked?
Yeah, so I think that I think the first thing is for organizations to recognize that this is an incredibly vulnerable period for employees who are in this phase of life. And there's significant research on this, and I just want to hone in specifically on the female talent piece for a moment. And there's plenty of research, and it's even more so now, McKinsey putting the spotlight on the female career and the vulnerabilities around that in the mid-career phase. And this is the phase of career where generally the decision has been made we're finding it often in the sort of 30s to more than the late 20s or the early 20s to start a family, often at a career high point. And then the sense of, have I reached the fork in the road? Can I do this? And looking for role models that they can't find. I'm talking about authentic role models who have a life outside of work and are managing to be good parents, or let me just say good as in they're getting the job done, while also being able to fulfill a career. And when people can't see that that's possible, they start to doubt whether they can do it. And that's been the issue for so long, where there's the vulnerability of the loss of key talent, which is unnecessary at this time. Yeah. And so for organizations to kind of recognize that their support at this time is really, really important. And then to kind of define, well, what does that support look like? And obviously the coaching that we do is one element of being able to support parents transitioning during this time. But it's also about the attitudes and behaviors of people internally towards their parents. You know, what is the message that's actually going out about how they value working parents? Things like, as an example, on a sort of policy level, you know, it's almost like it's a tick box exercise. Oh, well, we now do paid leave for X number of months, tick, tick, tick. And it's really about, you know, each year maybe thinking about, okay, where are there gaps in our working parent thinking? And so it's exciting to see things happening now, like dads getting more parental leave. And if anything that's come out of the pandemic is dads need to get more leave, and it needs to be paid, and they need to be encouraged to take it. It shouldn't be seen as a taboo. They shouldn't be doing the walk of shame, going off on paternity leave, where they feel they still have to be online and connected. No, you need to be at home, becoming a dad, supporting your wife, taking charge of things yourself, building your confidence and competence, because she's going to need that to step back into work. You want to start as you aim to go on. And so I really do believe that you know, it's great that some organizations are really waking up to the fact that actually even 2 weeks, which is the concession we've now had from a legal point of view, is not enough. And working new parents have loved the fact to have both of them at home during this time. That's been the gift of COVID, that they're both at home at this time. So that's the one thing. Another thing that's come through recently is companies waking up to being able to support parents who've lost a child at any stage during pregnancy, and giving them not like a day of or two of compassionate leave, but actual leave to grieve and to recover, not just emotionally, but physically. And I mean, what companies wouldn't want to support the mental and physical health of their people? So those are two things. Another thing is in attitudes towards flexibility and agility and, you know, virtual working. A gift from COVID. Thank you. You know, it kind of like changed everything overnight. But now it's the case of, you know, I hope nobody's got this mentality of back to normal, because that would be...
It's not going to happen. Yeah, it won't.
Risk.
The reality has changed completely.
Hand over fist. But it's now the joy of it is that I think it's taken so much pressure off mums and dads at this time. Now, mums particularly, you know, needing to be home to relieve a nanny or to fetch their children from daycare, and then being able to not having to feel guilty. So it's the guilt that's gone. It's that amazing feeling of being trusted and empowered to do what you have to do, because we will make the sacrifice, you know. And I always think, give flexibility, people will give flexibility in return. It's the most amazing way of building kind of loyalty and commitment. And so I think that has taken the pressure off those awkward conversations that used to be the order of the day in the sort of pre-COVID period.
It's as if the focus has changed from work-life balance to really true work-life integration, that it becomes part of your day-to-day operation. So I think that's great.
Rather than balance, it's sort of finding the rhythm of that, you know, in many ways, of how the two of you are working from home, how you're managing the life and the work component in your respective different ways.
As partners in doing this. I'd like to ask the participants to keep those questions coming. We're going to have 5 minutes right at the end of the webinar. So if you have a particular question for Melanie, please put that in the question and answer, and we'll definitely get to that. Keep the chat going as well. So if you found, again, things that have worked for you as a couple, things that you do often that you know other people will get value from, please share that with us in the chat. Mel, as a final comment from you, if you had one piece of advice for expectant parents and parents with children, what would it be? One piece of wisdom that you'd like to share as a final comment?
Well, I would relate it perhaps to the return to work, because that is the hardest thing as a working mom or dad, when you're having to go back to work and not have that full 100% attention on the child, is that you don't judge yourself and don't judge the situation too soon on your return. You take it one day at a time, tap into your support system, and just recognize that the return is a process. It's not an event. And during that process, there will be lots of different emotional responses that you have, but just allow yourself to go through that process. You will find the rhythm. You will energize out of that change curve. And so do it without self-judgment, but with self-care.
Yeah, awesome. I like that. Melanie Green from Great Expectations, thank you very much for being here today. We're going to chat to Mel again during the end at the Q&A, so we're looking forward to that. Our final panelist, and by no means the last, is Jackie Cabb. Now, Jackie works for Alexander Forbes. She's a leadership development specialist, and her areas of expertise include leadership, resilience, culture, and building high-performing teams. Now, she's a parent as well. She's a mum of 3 boys, aged 21, 19, and 17. And she tells me that she loves the outdoors and she loves learning new things that really take her out of her comfort zone. So, Jackie, you're welcome to take yourself off mute. And thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks, Lisa.
So the first question that I'd like to ask you, and remember, we're now talking about our third viewpoint, which is from an organizational point of view. From Alexander Forbes' point of view, in the last 18 months, what have you seen in terms of your employees specifically trying to balance both work and parenthood? What's coming out for you?
So definitely we've seen that there has been a sense of overwhelm and stress. Certainly people are working very long hours. There's a lot of meeting fatigue, being in back-to-back meetings all day and then trying to do the work at night. So we've also had a sense of isolation. We're working completely virtually. So those that don't have families at home, feeling a sense of isolation, and obviously the grief as people lose their loved ones. But I think what I've seen really been very and really amazing to see is the number of people attending our trainings and our webinars. We have had a significant increase in people really wanting, because the skills we teach are not just for the workplace, they're very much for people's personal lives. And we're seeing 200 to 300 people signing in for a webinar, which has been amazing. And also the flexibility and the adaptability. It's just remarkable how our organization has gone. We went overnight completely virtual, and how people have adapted and learned new skills like Microsoft Teams, etc. So it's been very encouraging, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I mean, you've spoken to me about the resilience courses that you run at Alex Forbes, specifically teaching people in this very difficult time of tremendous change, how to stay resilient. What type of stuff do you cover in those courses, and how have you seen employees react to that?
So we've definitely seen a shift. We always ask our employees at the start of our trainings, how are you feeling? And we saw a lot of words like overwhelm, stress, anxiety. What we're starting to see as we've navigated, we've run over 60 webinars since the start of COVID. We've seen people starting to put words like grateful, refreshed, hopeful, blessed, positive. So we've started to see that shift. So the things that we really focus on are things, there were 3 blocks that we did. One was the neuroscience of navigating disruption. One was the neuroscience of mindfulness, and one was really building healthy mind habits, focusing on the importance of exercise, of sleep. Can't emphasize the importance of sleep. We know that kids are cranky when they don't get enough sleep. As human beings, we can't think and function without sleep. Things like nutrition and the importance of nutrition, mindfulness, meditation, breathing. Those are some of the topics that we've been covering. And we've also looked a lot at equipping our leaders with how to lead virtually, how to build trust, how to build connection virtually, and really emphasizing how do we show concern, care and concern, and having empathy for our people, obviously, especially those that are juggling multiple demands. We've also looked at things like stress management, substance abuse, work-life balance or work-life integration, grief and loss, and trying to maintain a positive mindset or a growth mindset. Those are some of the themes that we've been covering.
Yeah, that's awesome. What have you found that line managers really struggled with in terms of managing remote teams? What is it that they find hard?
I think holding people accountable, really trusting that their employees will get the work done, and finding time to connect. And I think also taking on a heavy load where people are struggling emotionally. It's almost like you need to be a qualified psychologist now as a manager to really be able to support and hold people through difficult times. So I think those have been some of the key challenges.
Yeah, I hear you. One of the conversations, Jackie, that you and I have had was around the idea that we've got to be super parents, we've got to be super employees, we've got to do it all, and you highlighted the fact that that kind of viewpoint really leads people to burnout, and you've shared some of the insights around the World Health Organization around burnout. What are you seeing around burnout, and what should people be cognizant of, both from an employee point of view, a line manager point of view, and an organizational point of view?
Yeah, so I think what's really important, Lita, is understanding that energy is a currency for high performance and success. And this is true both in our personal lives, especially as parents, you need a lot of energy, right? As well as in our work lives. But what we need to understand is that energy is finite. It actually runs out. So we cannot continue to push. We can't continue to work excessive hours and manage a home and raise children. It is going to lead to burnout. So what we need to do is really encourage our people to spend time recovering and re-energizing. We see things like exercise or taking a lunch break as a luxury. It's not a luxury. It's an absolute essential if people are going to be able to sustain high performance in a very demanding world. So some of the things we're encouraging at Alexander Forbes is taking short breaks throughout the day. We're encouraging people. I'm seeing a lot of 30-minute meetings or 45-minute meetings. So where people have multiple meetings in the day, there is a gap to go get a drink, to have a snack, to sit in the sunshine and soak up a bit of sunlight on your skin. So taking those short breaks, we're also encouraging a reduction in meetings because we do know that people are suffering with meeting fatigue. So all these kinds of little tips, even just booking out focus time, what we're finding is people are multitasking all the time. While we're in meetings, we're sending emails, and we're absolutely exhausted. It's very depleting. Multitasking is hugely depleting for the brain. This fragmented attention and this information overload. So really to set aside, my boss was very, very strict with this when we went into lockdown, saying to me, Jackie, set aside hours in your calendar where you can focus on your strategic work, on planning, on prioritizing, where you don't have, this multitasking and constant noise. And I think I'd encourage parents to do the same, is to set aside focus time for their kids, where the laptop's off, the cell phone's off, and even if it's 15 minutes, it doesn't have to be extended periods of time, but just have periods of focus time. For example, when they come home from school, just to catch up, how was your day? Very, very important.
Yeah, I like that. The energy is a currency, so you've got to manage it as a currency. You don't have an infinite amount of that, so you have to manage that. At 10:30, my son, who's next door doing his class, said to me he's got a break at 10:30. So we have arranged to have tea at 10:30 for 15 minutes. So I'm really looking forward to that. I like that tip as well. So guys, in the chat, please keep those ideas coming. If you have any particular questions for any of our panelists, please put that in. Jackie, as a final question from Alexander Forbes, anything else that you can give as advice to other organizations to make sure that they support working parents and that they make sure that people are resilient, that they are helping them to achieve that high performance, but in a sustainable way, as a final comment from you?
Yeah, so I think that we need to recognize that David Rock says that we're entering an era where we're experiencing an epidemic of overwhelm. So really for organizations to understand that people are going through a really tough time and that people don't necessarily have the resilience to cope. And this is not just a COVID experience. When COVID is over, the world will continue to change rapidly, to be uncertain, to be complex. And we need to be equipping our people with resilience skills so that they can cope and thrive in this ever-changing world. So one critical thing is for managers to engage with people, not just from a work perspective. So to have these weekly check-ins where they just ask 2 questions. How are you feeling? And what can I do to support you? And where managers have large teams, you can also set up a buddy system where staff support each other to have a check-in. So we've got to be very mindful that if we don't manage the mental, psychological, emotional well-being of our people, they will not thrive in this current complex and volatile world.
Yeah, and we'll see that in our organization's performance. We'll see it in the bottom line. So it's absolutely critical as our biggest asset. Awesome. Jackie, thank you so much for being here. Please stay on the line because we're going to get into Q&A. We've got a couple of minutes for Q&A. Before we go into the questions, a couple of notes on Talent Talks. Talent Talks is an online platform to share resources around everything to do with talents. Now, I know in the area of people, I've got an HR background, learning and development background, but I sometimes get stuck because I don't have deep expertise in every single thing that I need to do. And that's really where Talent Talks can come in for you as well. Do you need to design an employee engagement survey? We've got a template. Do you need to write a competence guide? We can help you with that. We've got stuff on the website. Or if you need to design a total reward strategy, we can help you with that as well. So please have a look at www.talenttalks.net. In the last couple of minutes, I'd like to ask the panelists to, again, put on their webcams, take themselves off mute, and I'd like to bring in Burnout Oberholzer, who's one of our directors at Talent Talks. Burnout, please take yourself off mute. Let us see your face. Any particular questions that you've seen pop up during the conversation that our panelists can have a think about?
Great, thanks, Lita. There's been some lovely questions and comments. The first one in particular, and I'm conscious of time, so I want to make sure that we answer this one, is for Melanie Green. And it specifically asks for her experience in normalizing parenting for dads in the context of toxic masculinities and a society where we have perceived gender roles that encourage men to not be active parents. South Africa has so many children growing up without the presence of a father. And Melanie, if you can share your thoughts and experience on that point, would be great.
My thoughts are really just stemming from some anecdotal evidence and experience that we've had, which is not considerable as yet. We fairly recently introduced parental transition coaching for dads. So, I can talk from that experience mainly. And that is that it's remarkable, it's exciting, it is inspiring to listen to the dads that have already come through the program and how much they are thinking deeply about this. It's not just, coming into the coaching with, I feel this great sense of responsibility over my family. It's really wanting to play a meaningful role as a caregiver and not just breadwinner, as I mentioned before. And so I think the issue there is about this needing more visibility. I think it needs to be much more publicized. I think organizations maybe have an opportunity to maybe get internal groups of dads talking to each other. There are conversations happening on this that, there's so much visibility around the working mom and her parenting role and trying to combine the two, but there's not that much that's publicized on dads' experiences of this transition. And I think that if that happens, we'll be going a long way to making it easier for dads to be perhaps more vocal about it, and for it to be a trend that spreads. And so that's my view on it. And I also think that it would be helpful if the partners, if your wife, the wife of the dad, the mum, obviously, if they let their husbands take more of an active role, in the sense of really encouraging them to find their own way and build their own confidence, rather than, you know, men coming away feeling like, my husband's wonderful expression is, feeling like a third nostril. So that's
that makes sense.
more visibility, people talking about it a whole lot more.
Opening that dialogue. Awesome. Melanie, thank you very much. I am conscious of time. We're 1 minute over. So this is the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. To our panelists, Melanie Green, Caitlin Watson, Jackie Cab, thank you very much. Werner, thank you for your support as well. And to Ifan Link, Trevor Warner for helping us set up the webinar. To you guys, thank you for being here. Please look out on talenttalks.net or on LinkedIn next week for some of our insights and the sound bites from this webinar. And we're hoping to see you at next month's webinar as well. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. All the best. Cheers.